In this file, I have a hatch pattern here to show that my intended walls are going to be brick. What I'd like for the laser to do is to etch this pattern onto my material so I don't have to spend hours scoring in all of these little tiny bricks in here. However, if I take my file here that's already saved as a DXF and I just save it and I come into Lightburn, and again, I can import either through this button or File, Import, and I come to my hatch file, we're going to see that my hatches did not come in at all. For whatever reason, associated hatches cannot be imported into Lightburn. So what we have to do to bring hatches into Lightburn is explode them, and then they do export without issue. So I'm going to just delete that from Lightburn, and then in AutoCAD, if I click on a hatch, what I'm going to have to do is then use the command explode. So that's keyboard shortcut X, enter, and now this is no longer considered a hatch anymore. Let me just refresh my, there we go, because it was still, I don't like why it's still highlighting that, but I'll get over it. These are now individual lines. This is no longer considered a hatch according to AutoCAD. It's just various line work. This here is still a hatch. So when I click on it, it brings up my hatch menu. My property bar here says hatch. So I'm just going to click on all of my hatches at the moment and then X, enter. And I could have exploded them all in the first go. I just didn't. So now if I save this file, and I go into Lightburn and I import in my hatch test, we can see that those green lines or that green hatch did import in here. So when we're dealing with hatches in Lightburn, we can approach them two different ways. So the laser has two basic functions. It can either cut or it can etch. So when I have the laser following a cut, all it's going to do is just follow this as a direct path. So it's just going to focus in on that pathway. If it's going to etch, what the laser does is it's going to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, much like an ink printer, and etch material away. And so while in this case, etch may be my preferred outcome of this hatch, it's also going to add a significant amount of time to the job. I have been playing with a workaround for this. It's a little bit of a hit or miss at the moment, depending on the material. So I'm going to show you either how you can do it as a pure etch or how you can kind of play with working around where we can have it cut but still sort of etch. So in order to transfer my hatch into an etch, the first thing I need to do is just select something that's on that layer. In this case, it's layer 3, this green one. And then I'm going to go into the edit panel and say, which maybe I just didn't select that line. There we go. I'll go into the edit panel and I'll say I want to select all of the shapes or all of the line work that's on that current layer. Once I have all of my green line work selected, I'm going to go into the edit menu again to say that I want to convert this line work into a bitmap or into an image. As I'm converting it, I can then also play around with how dark or how light it's going to convert that into a picture. And then when I click OK, this is no longer a line, this is now an image. One thing to keep in mind too is that this should be one of the kind of final steps with your prep work, because now this image is no longer associated with these lines. So if I wanted to move this part of the building on my piece of material, the picture doesn't move with it. That background doesn't move with it. So if you are going for this conversion to etch, you want to have all of your pieces in place before doing that. So now that I have this as just an image that's going to etch into, if I look at my preview of how this is going to run, we can see here that it is going to take an hour and 28 minutes and 31 seconds. If I look at it from the very beginning, so I can even have it play here as it cuts, about 1 minute 19 seconds of that job was it cutting, and then the rest of this time is going to be the laser moving back and forth as it etches that brick material in. And again, if you have the time to sit and monitor the machine for an hour and a half while it's going, and this is the option you want to go with, I'm not going to stop you. It is going to create a nice end result, but there is another option which can get a pretty similar result and within such a small fraction of the time. So if I just Control Z to undo my work until this is back to just being line work, I can work with this speed and power to try to make my speed as fast as possible with my power as little as possible, so it's not going to cut all the way through. And that's what I've done here in the case of like these blue lines, is I have the speed really high with just a power of 5%, where versus these red lines are going to need 70% power to cut. So the red lines are going to cut all the way through, but since it's going to move so fast with so little power on these blue, it's not going to cut all the way through. It's only just going to etch those in. So I can do the same thing with this green line, is if I change the speed of this green line, and I don't know why my little cursor thing does that when I get close to the edge, to around, I'll do 700 millimeters per second with a power of just 2%, it's not going to cut. Now, I may want to take a scrap of material to kind of play around to find the perfect speed to get the end result that I want when it comes to these. But now when I look at a preview of my file, this is going to take 7 minutes and 32 seconds because it's going to treat each one of those bricks as its own little just cut line that it's following. Particularly in the case of this brick, I'd want to be cautious with this speed and power, because if I have it set too high, it's going to cut every brick out, just like it's going to cut out this outline, and then my material piece is completely moot. So again, you might want to play around with some scrap material on it. This shortcut, again, doesn't work on all materials, but it is that consideration to saving some time. And then, of course, the final consideration with hatches is to determine whether they are going to be worth it to put on your model. Sometimes with large mass models, a hatch is not going to help the model design in the long run, and it might be best just to leave it out altogether. So if I'm doing a model of a really large building that's going to be done at a fairly small scale, that hatch might not really add anything to it, and I might just want to leave it off. But hopefully this helped a little bit clarify some considerations when it comes to hatches and laser prints.